So thanks for the introduction, Dina. Yeah, I'm Connor. I'm another member of the client success team. Thanks all for joining today's chat. We're going to be talking. So this we've changed our format a little bit. We've made this chat as part of a series. You don't need the context from the previous one, or you don't necessarily have to go to the next one to get value from this one. But the series right now, we're talking about getting ready, creating a new project for 2022, those types of plans. Now, if you do have questions about something completely different, like a reporting question or stuff to do that's related to a live project as opposed to setup, you can definitely feel free to chat those to us. Dina's going to be reading those questions as we go. If it's something that we're talking about, we'll address it right there, or we're going to budget some time at the end to go over questions as well. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now, and we'll pick up where we left off. Today's session is going to be completely focused on testing the system. So everybody should be able to see my screen now. I'm just referencing the 7 things you need to do when copying your project for a new year. This is an article from our Help Center. I won't be going into the details from this article. I'm going to be referencing 2 specific testing articles, which I'll toggle over to in a second. But these are the main steps, the main things that we always want to keep in mind when we're getting a new project started, especially when we're copying. So reminder, we went over the updating the dates since they'll copy over. If we're copying those products, they'll copy over as is from the previous project. Updating the auto bill plan dates as well, because it's a separate module, and then editing the form. So we did a little bit of that already. And we will go into a little bit of how we can make further adjustments after we test. But again, today we're going to be focusing on testing the system. And the reason why we're only focusing on one step of the testing or of the setup here is because testing is such an important part of the entire process, 1 through 7. Obviously, you'll probably still need to make some initial adjustments related to these first 3 steps, but testing should be something that happens ideally more than a few times. Definitely probably more than once, unless you really already know what your setup is. But even when I'm making my desk side chat template projects, I'm usually making a few different test users so I can get a feel for all the different types of scenarios that I want to be able to walk through. And just like that, you would also want to make sure that if you have different types of applicants that are going to be coming and registering with your project, that you have all of those different situations accounted for as well. But it is very straightforward to create a test user, so we'll start there. So this is the creating a test user, again, from our Help Center, regfax.com/help. It sort of walks through some of the initial things to keep in mind while you're testing. So I'll just do that right here. So this is the project that we set up in our last session. And this is a screen that I never really want to see when I'm looking at somebody's project. Zero users so far. So that means nobody's even tested the system. So first things first, let's get a test user in the system. I've already updated some of my product dates, made some changes to my forms, and made some updates to my auto bill plans, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead, and the easiest way to get that test link to start testing the system is going to be from the project front end. That link, you just click on the project name, your drop down of projects. These are our test ones here. And then project front end is going to be right there, or your other projects are going to be here, and then the project front end, that opens up that link. Another place to find that link is going to be in the project settings. Oops, there we go. And then the project front end, as well as this link here. So project front end opens up a new tab just like that. This would be a link that you could just easily copy. So if you wanted to share it with somebody else, that would be a good place to find that link. I believe it's also found in the registration, yes. So there's a couple different places to find it, but again, the easiest way would just be to click on the project name, and it's going to pop up right here. So getting started, I'm going to just walk through a quick test user. This is again a family system, so it has the a parent or somebody who's signing multiple people up, whether that's a parent or like an organizer signing up their group. And this system is designed where an account is created for everybody to sign up within in the group or the family. If you do have an anonymous system, important tip or call out, a tool that you have at your fingertips, is to test this on a incognito browser. So it won't recognize if you're coming back to the system. Again, if you do have what's called an anonymous system where you don't need to create an account first, it'll recognize that the system's designed to recognize the device, so that it makes it easy in case somebody does come back to add more things under that same account. So I'll go ahead and get this started. And one of the things that's easy about testing a system that's not anonymous is you can just create as many different accounts with using the same browser. I'm just using a test email here and getting started. Okay, so I'll go ahead and skip through all of these pieces here, but one thing I do want to look for, and so there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, I want to make sure that the forms and the fields are working the way I want them to, displaying the right information. If I have any fields that are related to a specific program or year or season, I want to make sure that that's up to date to reflect the upcoming year or program or season. And another thing to keep in mind is the conditional logic. So here is actually an example of where we really only want to see these fields if this is selected as yes. Otherwise, we don't want to make this a required field if they're not going to add an additional parent or guardian. So that's something where actually I think purposely left this out on the when we were updating the forms on our last session. Once I go through this test, I'll show exactly where I can go to make sure that that's working as we want it to moving forward. So easy thing to come across when you're testing. And again, that's an easy thing to catch, especially if you haven't started registration yet, which is why we want to make sure we test it as much as possible before we launch. So this is a form. Oh, go ahead, Dina.
One thing, another common place where you see this is when you're giving the option for other. If it's a menu where individuals are choosing something and other is an option, you're going to want to make sure that you have a text box triggered to that other button, so that if they select other as their option and as their selection, they're given the opportunity to put the information in. One of the other tricks of the trade that we recommend you keep in mind while testing is thinking from your perspective of what are you going to want to run reports on? What information at the end of the game are you going to want to pull from your system? And are you asking those questions in your registration? So of course you're looking for all the functionality of the system, but on your higher level as well, from an organizational perspective, we want you to make sure you're thinking about, again, am I asking the questions to get the information out of my reports later on that I'm going to need?
Great point. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that reporting piece, because that's also another reason why it's helpful to have more than one test user, because that makes it really a lot easier to see like what a real report would look like, because you're not going to download a spreadsheet of one row most times. You certainly can, but if you have more than one test user, that'll make it easier to see what it would look like if you're pulling that report. So you can really get a feel for that before you go live. Because it's definitely much easier to make those adjustments when you're still in that testing development phase of the project. And here's an example of where I did update the form here correctly, and so the conditional logic is working as intended. And that's something I would be looking for as I'm walking through each of these forms. One other sort of special tip, if you want to make sure you're testing for the roadblocks and the form settings, like making sure that all the required fields are filled out, you certainly can do that. If you want to just be able to look for certain things, like for example, like an initial test like I'm doing here, you can turn that setting off, but you just need to make sure you remember whether you want to have these required fields filled out or you want to be able to allow them to continue working. It'll still show up as not completed, but you do have the option to control. And that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to test a few different things and you do have a lot of questions in your application process. As long as you're keeping that in mind that you need to make that change, it's one thing you can adjust during the testing phase. Okay, so I'll just create one. I want to get a couple of different details here for the at the child level. And the reason for that is this is the applicant that's going to really have, this is where I'm signing up for the program. So I want to get a couple more details so I can see what that would look like in a report. Okay,
Connor, we have a question that just came in from Erin. She said, how do you turn those off during testing? Erin, what are you specifically referencing when you say those? And we'll get that question.
How do you turn off the mandatory fields without going back in and like, is there a switch somewhere? It sounded like you said there was.
So I wouldn't recommend turning off the fields being mandatory. Like keep that on and because that's helpful. But I'm about to jump back to the forms and I'll show you where you can turn off the roadblock setting, because that's the setting.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because that's where you can, if you turn the roadblock off, if you have a roadblock on, and you want to make sure that people, like when you actually have registrations going, that they need to fill out a form before they can continue, you have that roadblock on. But if you're in the testing phase and you don't want to have to fill out every single required field to keep going, then you'd turn that off during the testing phase.
Yes, that's going to save me so much time.
Oh, great. No, I'm glad that's exactly the type of thing I want to hear while we're doing these. Okay, so here are all of my my programs, my products, and maybe one thing also that I can take a look at here is maybe I do want to make an adjustment in terms of how I'm displaying these products, these programs. Do I want to have everything all displayed at once? Do I want to open registration in waves based on the season? And that's something I can also see while I'm in this testing phase. Okay, and I want to continue through here. So do you want to check the auto bill plan? We can see it looks like we've updated the dates for most of these correctly, except for this one. That's a good thing to see. It shows that it's due today because I haven't updated the monthly installment due date. So it's already showing as due as soon as it's ordered. So that'll be something that you can see, and we can go back and see what that setting is specifically. When we're going back, I'll set our correct date monthly installment plan here. But that's something, usually this is caused by the end date of the auto bill plan being not up to date. And let's go ahead and not add another applicant for now, because the next thing I want to talk about is going to be the payments testing. So as you can see, when I get to the checkout form, it gives me a bunch of different messages. One, it's reminding me that my merchant account setup is incomplete. So that's something, again, it's a step that's part of those 7 steps. We want to make sure that the merchant account is connected. But it's also showing that, and this is not necessarily connected to the merchant account setup, but it's also showing that it's not going to process the payment. So this is actually a setting that is defaulted when you have the system in development mode. What that means is it's all payments are going to be accepted as test payments. They will not actually process even after you go live. So one of the reasons why you want to make sure you have that setting up to date before you publish your registration to go live, but also this is a great tool to use in this period, so you can actually see, like, for example, I signed up for a payment plan. Now I can actually see what that's going to look like by running a test payment. So I'm going to just briefly toggle over to, we have a specific article just for test payments, and 2 ways to test payments. So we do recommend, before you publish the registration for everybody to access, that you do some sort of test payment, and you can even like test the actual payment and cancel it, or whatever the case may be, but just something to, once you're live, making sure that your merchant account is connected properly the way you need it to by using an actual payment or a test amount. But we're going to be covering specifically the payments in development mode, which there's a lot more information here on. So what that means is, and we have a couple different ways you can use development mode payments, so any payment, even if it's a real card, would process as a test payment at this point, but you don't actually have to use a real card in order to run a test payment while it's in development mode. So I'm just going to use, this is the 4 and a bunch of 1s is a test Visa credit card. We have numbers for all different types of cards and even ACH if you wanted to do that as well. So for example, if you have different levels of service fees or different types of accepted payments, you can make sure that those are applying properly. So that's why there's all those different numbers here. As a default, I just use the credit card because that's the one that's easiest for me to remember. Oh, and one other thing that's, I haven't mentioned this yet. For my purposes, I don't necessarily want to see the email in my inbox, but we do recommend that when you're creating these test users, that you at least have one of your test users connect to your real inbox, so that way you can see and make sure you're receiving those emails as an applicant would, and making sure that they're up to date as you need them to be. And we can also see those from the back end, of course, but obviously it'll look different from an inbox than it will from the RegPack back end. Okay, so let's go ahead and process this payment now. And then we can go ahead, make sure it goes through and toggle over to the back end. Okay, so it looks like on the back end, it's already showing as authorized, which is great. And we can already see that these are the upcoming charges. Connor Test is all signed up for the monthly installments auto bill plan. So this is the exact type of thing that we'd be looking for, making sure that this is applying as we want it to. For the way that I have this set up, it looks great to me. But again, seeing this information on the back end once we've created that test user is great. We can look at the parent level information as well as the child level information and how that looks. One quick call out is that the basic information report, these info view reports, this is also something that of course you can have updated. And while you're filling out this information, you'll see more information on depending on what field you already have set up to display here. This is a report template that I have set up that includes a lot of the child information, which is why we're seeing more of that since I filled that information out while we were testing.
Connor, question for you. So now we know how to make the payment and we can check all the payment features. So in my project that I'm running, all of the things that I'm offering have dates and times, and they're all under $3,000. So I really want to take advantage of purchase protection because my organization then doesn't have to worry about any of the hit if people cancel, and it's something that our users are paying for. So how do I tell if that's on and if it's something that my users have access to?
Great question. I mean, something regardless of whether you are currently using purchase protection or not, you want to be able to know where it is. So actually, okay, so for just the example we have right here, we can see that purchase protection is already enabled. So that means that it was automatically added for this particular test, and it's already been paid for, which is why it shows as enabled as opposed to it would show similar logo, but with the language would be eligible for purchase protection. That would be the language. So the way to confirm whether purchase protection is an option or available or enabled is from the users themselves. That's another important reason to test out the system. The settings that you have under products won't give you a clear picture. So let's go ahead and actually just add one more product that would be purchase protection eligible onto the same user so we can see the difference. Okay, so this, let's see, there we go. Eligible for purchase protection because it hasn't started yet. This one wasn't eligible since we're in the middle of this season. And then this one is already paid for. So if we hadn't already paid for purchase protection, it'll look like this, eligible. And another way to check, besides the user cart, is going to be from the checkout. So you can see this from the back end or the front end. Purchase protection is going to be shown at the top here. It'll show that purchase protection is added, if it's added as a default option, or whether it's an optional where they select it, choose to add it as they're signing up. That'll show them those options there. Okay. So let's go back to both the where we can update the forms and the auto bill plans. I'll just start briefly with the auto bill plans, the new monthly installments. There we go. That sort of confirms what I was looking at, where it was showing a monthly plan where it was making me pay in full today, and that's because I haven't updated the end dates yet. So if I wanted to make a second or make sure that this additional plan was enabled as the way I want it to, as monthly installments, I would just update the payment schedule and then make sure we have a future date. So let's say, oops, not that far future. Let's say June 2022. We'll do beginning of June, so people are paid before all the programs that I've created so far are ended. So that's where you would update that, and that's something you can definitely catch while you're testing if it's showing not the way you intend to on a copied plan. Always a first place to look is make sure your end date's up to date.
Great. Connor, in order to make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time, we're already at 3:26. So are there any other key points that we want to share, or any tricks of the trade we want to make sure people are keeping in mind as they're going through their testing process?
Yeah, great question and call out. I think we've basically covered the essentials, I would think, between different ways to create the test users, different ways that you can be testing your payments, and then things to look for while you're testing the system. I think just a couple other things to, or I guess things that I can show right now, just a quick call out items. If you wanted to make sure you know where that tool is with the roadblock, that's going to be in the form settings, not the form field, but when you're editing the form properties, roadblock is right here. So that'll make your testing easier. And then also, if you need to make sure your triggers are up to date, all you have to do for something like the conditional logic question here would be just to update and save. So that way we make sure that it's going to show as intended moving forward. I think other than that, one other thing that you can take a look at from from testing is your actual form style. So things that you can actually make changes to is the way that you're labeling some of your buttons. Things that you can also update is the dashboard. We've done a few different chats on how to update what it looks like when a registration is completed or when people are logging back in and want to navigate to add more programs. But that's something that also is great to sort out while you're testing, making sure that the style of your project is up to date. Anything that you wanted to add, Dina?
No, I would just remind about the incognito, which I think is a great tool, especially with anonymous systems. But regardless, being able to test. And then the one thing that I would strongly, strongly recommend is not being the only one who's testing. We say it sometimes, we get so lost in our own work. Sometimes you miss spelling errors. Sometimes you miss the little things that are in front of you. So we always recommend finding somebody who may have no idea what it is you're doing and have them run through the system and have them run through a test. They'll be able to give you feedback that you may miss because, again, you're living in it, and it's the nature of the beast sometimes when you're doing these systems.
That's a great point. And that's something we actually do as a company as well. When we're making anything that's a RegPack project that we're using internally, we definitely do send that out to whether it's immediate team members or sometimes even multiple departments will test out a project to make sure it's really working and we're getting multiple different types of perspectives on it as well. So yeah, definitely something we'd recommend and that we do as a company as well.
Great. So I think, Connor, I say let's turn. Let's see if anybody has some questions. If not, we have a fun Kahoot game to quiz everybody just a little bit on some of the things that we covered this afternoon. So Connor, if you want to stop sharing, I'll go ahead and share. We'll do a little Kahoot. Again, guys, no pressure. This is for fun. Again, there will be swag to give out at the end. So play along, have some fun. It's really short and sweet. It's 4 questions, 5 questions. So go ahead. If you're going to go ahead to join at www.kahoot.it, and you can see our game pin over here on the screen. It's 2805552. So once we get some players on board here, we will go ahead and start today's Kahoot. And while we're waiting for everybody to join, some things to keep in mind with Kahoot. There are going to be colors and shapes that correspond with answers. So I will read through them, but you can also reference it. So on your phone, you'll see a triangle that's a color and a square that's a color and a circle that's a color. Know that those reference answers that you'll see on the screen. There are also different types of questions. There are multiple answer questions where more than one answer is correct. So you want to choose as many as you can that you think are accurate. There are true and false questions. And then there's going to be one right answer out of a choice of 4. So we're going to give it one more second to see if anybody else wants to join. Right now we've got 3 players on board. Again, we'll give it another minute to join. Again, go to www.kahoot.it and enter that PIN code that's on the top of our screen. It's 2805552. Let's give it one more minute, and then we're going to go ahead and kick off. Thank you, Erin. We love it too. It's fun. It's great to use. It's a fun tool. We use it in our internal meetings. Definitely one of the best purchases, in my opinion, that we've made internally to keep things fun.
Yeah, we're excited to be able to share them with the Desk Side chats. If anybody's having trouble joining, can feel free to let one of us know, and we can help out with that. You should be able to still join even as we're starting. But yeah, we can go ahead and get started now, I think.
Perfect. We're going to dive in. All right, testing 101. First question. It's a multiple select, guys. Remember, multiple answers. I should check the following while testing: form triggers, email triggers, products, or roadblocks. What do you think, guys? What should you check while testing your system? Red triangle is form triggers, yellow circle, email triggers, blue triangle. Oh. All right. It looks like everybody selected at least one, which is right. All of these things are things we want you to pay attention to while you're going through the testing process.
Before we get to the next question, I do, the roadblocks is a bit of a trick answer. It is something you want to be aware of. You can turn it off while you're testing, but if you want to make sure it's enabled, you should also be looking for that while you're testing.
Great, thanks, Connor. It looks like me is in the lead. Let's see our next question. True or false? I should be the only one to test my RegPack project. True, blue, false, red. All right, we got 2 answers in so far. So we're waiting on one. False, exactly. You want to have multiple people test your system, give you feedback from different perspectives. It will only help it be a better system at the end of the day. Well, me is standing strong, but Erin's coming close. All right, the next one. If you are charging clients for a product, you should always have which form? A checkout form, red, about you form, yellow, emergency contact form, blue, or your favorite food form, green. Yes, checkout form. You want to make sure that your users have a way to pay for the products they're ordering. Oh, me is still on fire, but Erin can get this. She can come back for this. True or false? While testing, I can see if purchase protection is turned on or off. Blue true, red false. True, exactly. You can see if it is turned on or off and easily turn it on. Thanks for today. I feel more confident testing my projects. Not at all, I'm still lost. For red, wait, we were talking about testing today? Yellow. Blue, yes, I learned a few tricks I'm going to try. Or green, I knew all the tricks that were taught here already today. Great. So it looks like you guys are going to take something away from this and go try some new tricks while you're testing your system. And let's see, Connor, our winners in 3rd place, Michelle. Woo!
Nice.
2nd place, Erin. And 1st place, me. Thank you guys so much for playing. It was fun. Again, this was a great time with you guys. We appreciate you joining us. And Connor and I are here for a little while to answer some questions and anything else that you may have that you want to stick around and ask us.
And yeah, whoever me was, feel free to let us know and we'll make sure to keep track of that for moving forward.
It was me, Yaron.
Okay, there